Nogales, Arizona. We walked over the border, end up in Nogales, Mexico. We're walking, we meet Jose Manuel. And he says, hey, can you guys help me? Now, this guy doesn't speak any English. And here's his story. He comes from southeastern Honduras. So he walked from southern Honduras, okay, all the way up to Veracruz, Mexico. Over 30 days he spent walking. So this is a really amazing story, right? Why is he walking? Because he wants to get to the United States. He's got 3 children. He's got a wife. He has his mother. He has his aunt. And he's taking care of other people in his home. So he's like, I gotta go because we're starving. So he takes off. What little bit of money he was able to take with him was the money that he needs, that the family needs. So he has just basically you could say no money. He has no phone. Doesn't have a phone. Didn't even have a flip phone. He has no phone numbers of anybody to call once he gets to the border to call over into the United States because he doesn't know anybody. Because in the United States, because word went out throughout countries in many places in the world that, hey, if you get to the United States, you can apply for asylum. And once you apply for asylum on the basis of, not economic hardship, but if you can apply for asylum on the basis of your life is in danger in some way. So many Venezolanos, many Venezuelans who can say that they're against the Maduro government in Venezuela, many people who can make the claim that they are being tracked by narco traffickers, either like in El Salvador or Guatemala or Honduras or wherever, right? Or in Colombia. Many people making various claims, because you don't know once you get to the border, right? You can say like, yeah, my life is in danger, and so I need asylum. And so what happened in the United States, Trump said, like, no, absolutely not. We're going to put you in jail. In fact, we're going to separate children and their parents or whatever. We're sending you back wherever you came from. You're not coming in, and we're not going to process your asylum papers unless we are really certain that you need asylum and you're not an economic migrant. So somebody like him, I said, so listen, what's the basis upon which you're asking for asylum? What is this, right? And so Kamala Harris' idea is like, or many other people, is like, stop coming, stop making that trip. Come on, like at some point, like this is a really bad idea. He's a good human who is trying to do something for his family. But there's so many more good humans like him. And like, what do you do?
Hello my friends, today we'll be reacting to this video, Latinos take a DNA test. Long story short, these are Latinos that live in the United States. Very important detail. And essentially, they're shocked to discover that they're white. And for this video, I got the nice Papi Cubano trim. I don't want to spoil you more than that, so are you ready? Let's go!
Finally, to find out if I'm 100% Puerto Rican.
What? What does that even mean? 100% Puerto Rican? Oh man, you're gonna be disappointed. Do you even know what an ethnic DNA test does?
I really hope that I get full 100% Mexican, 100% Mexican. If I don't get 100% Mexican, I'm gonna be sad.
And here's someone else that is about to be shocked. Unless you look like this, how can you expect 100% Mexican native? I don't think anyone in the production team actually bothered to tell them how an ethnic DNA test actually works and what results to expect. Mexican or Latino is not a race. For example, all the people you can see here are Mexican, born in Mexico, Mexican culturally, Mexican passport, whatever you can think of. As you can see, 50 shades of skin color. But what binds Latinos together is not race, but the fact that they all speak Spanish. Hispanohablantes. aka a result of Spanish colonization.
Two nations in particular actually did broker a deal peacefully for the division of unconquered land. And this was no small deal either. It was not simply a distribution of one or two territories. Instead, these nations, Portugal and Spain, planned to rule the New World together. The start of Iberian land disputes can be traced back to Christopher Columbus's expedition to the New World. Before he had left, Columbus had failed to receive sponsorship for the trip from the Portuguese King John II. When King John met with the explorer and heard of his successful adventure and new discoveries, the monarch insisted that these newly found lands should belong to Portugal and not Spain. Different monarchs, Ferdinand and Isabella, protested this request and argued that it was Spain who should possess authority over the lands found by Columbus, and the Portuguese should have the right to do whatever activity they please in any area to the east of this new divider. This would allow Portugal to enter Brazil, as well as giving them more room to adventure wherever they wished around Africa. The new treaty still gave the vast majority of the New World to Spain. When a Portuguese explorer by the name of Pedro Álvares Cabral was on his way to India, he unintentionally made landfall on the coast of Brazil. The Portuguese took full advantage of the newly found territory and began to settle east and west of the divider. Surprisingly, the Spanish opted not to react to Portugal's expansion onto their side. They were aware of the Portuguese settling in Brazil, but did nothing about it. On the flip side, though, Spain seemed to become more possessive of the Asian continent than they were of the New World, and attempted to stop their Iberian neighbor expanding in Asia instead. The Treaty of Madrid would later be updated itself in 1761 with the Treaty of El Pardo. Essentially, Portugal and Spain had hoped and even planned to conquer all of the New World, and from the Spanish perspective, potentially all of the world together. This was under the assumption that they would be the only nations with such ambitions. They hoped to maintain good relations and avoid war with each other, but for one reason or another failed to prioritize the same thing with other colonial powers such as Britain or the Netherlands.
I want to know like how much like indigenous I have. That's like the main thing I want to know.
Ah, Vanessa, Vanessa, you seem to be the smartest in the group. Not only because he completely laughed at the Mexican dude when he expected 100% Mexican results,
100% Mexican if I don't get 100%.
but also because the main reason she's doing this test is to know how much indigenous ancestry she actually has. And that's very smart because DNA tests are exactly good at that. With high confidence, they can detect from what continent you're from.
Anxious. I don't know what I am. I'm having an identity crisis.
Carolina, yo soy tu padre.
I'm nervous. I'm very nervous. I'm worried I'm white.
I'm worried I'm white. No shame at all. Just imagine the public outrage if a white person said, "Oh my god, no, I hope I'm not black."
Oh my gosh, I'm 71.9% European. Hey!
Haha, what a loser. You're white. Guess who's lame? Oh my god. No shit. Bro, look at your face.
Spanish and Portuguese?
I'm shocked that you're shocked. I dare you. I double dare you. What language do you speak in Puerto Rico? As a matter of fact, the name Puerto Rico. What does it mean? What language? Now, I know it sounds like a conspiracy theory, but Spanish comes from this place in Europe. I know it's a crazy idea, and I know it's very far away from the Caribbean, but this is where you gotta trust me. People from this place called Spain actually sailed all the way to Puerto Rico. Now, more seriously, you can see that the test combines Spanish and Portuguese together, Iberian Peninsula. And this shows the limitations of these DNA tests. For them, the two groups are so close to one another that they can't differentiated.
Very white DNA test.
Excuse me, you say that this is a very white DNA test. I want to see your result.
3.2% Congolese and Southern East African. Let's go to the Congos.
Whoa, we're going to the Congo.
Hey, come on, let's go.
Just go there and let's see what's going to happen. What's interesting with this map of his African ancestry is that you can clearly see where the Spanish picked up all the slaves, literally from the entire west coast of Africa.
Wow. I'm a little bit in shock. I just always thought of myself as Puerto Rican, you know, half Puerto Rican. I didn't think I was, my family was originally from Spain and slaveholders.
Yeah. So how are you feeling, my friend?
I think it's actually pretty interesting that my husband and I have shared roots.
Yeah.
So I do appreciate that. And I think it's great for our children to know this information.
Gad, her genealogy test came back negative. Yeah, she's related to slaveholders. What are we going to do? Should Whoopi flog her on the show? What?
Can't move forward in life by always looking back. In the exact same way, it seems amazing to me that she could feel either relief that she doesn't have slave owners or hurt that her past does have slave owners, because that presumes that there is intergenerational guilt that is passed on, which is such a grotesque idea. So in a sane world, it would simply not matter in the least bit one way or the other what her genealogy was. But when you play the identity politics game, then of course it becomes a jarring reality.
Gad is completely right. The whole thing is it's her game that she just lost at. She set up the rules. She made this game for the rest of us, and now she's losing at it. Of course it doesn't matter who your ancestors were. Of course it doesn't matter what they did or what they didn't do. You're your own person. But no, under this leftist ideology that she pushes, you're responsible for all of it. And not only them, you're responsible for everybody ever who ever looked like you. So the idea that she got caught up in her own thing.
What is a political cost, let's say, of saying we're going to throw your hat in with a program like reparations? How much do you think those considerations should be made?
Well, because when we really do start to assert and believe and understand and see how our destinies are tied, we kind of get away from this idea that only, you know, people of color care about other people of color and only white people care about other white people and so on. There are a lot of systems that we have to dismantle, but also it does get into this interesting area of where we are as a country about identity, because like, what does it mean to be Black? Who is Black and who isn't, especially as our country becomes more biracial and multiracial. Same thing with being Latino, same thing. It brings up all these questions of like.
Okay, do you all see what she was asked about reparations? And she invoked her people. And then she said, what is really Black? Girl.
Dudes on the police department hurt my feelings because I was all over Barack Obama. That was my dog. Smart. He was Black, even though he ain't Black.
How do you mean he's not Black?
What part? Hold on.
No. How do you mean Barack Obama's not Black?
How is he Black? Give me an example.
His father's Black.
So that makes him Black?
Yeah.
What about his mama?
His mother's white.
So that makes him Black? Sit down real quick. Let me school you real quick.
Okay, go ahead and school me.
With all due respect, okay? With all due respect, Barack Obama isn't Black because he have a drop of Black in him. My kids are not Black. My wife is white, I'm Black. They're biracial. They're not Black. See, what happened in history is that if a black man or a white man or any other race had a drop of anything else, and it eliminated them from being pure white. It was called a one-drop rule. If a white person had a baby with a Black person, they did not want the white race to not be pure, so you defaulted to the other race. Today, they practice the same thing. What makes my son Black? He is 50-50. He's half white, half Black. There's no way that you call him Black unless you want the white race to be pure. And I think that's what that is.
Really reluctant. I don't know how you felt when you did it, Whoopi, but I was really reluctant to do it because I just sensed that there could be something in my family history that would be disappointing.
Negative.
Negative, yes. I thought I was going to have that kind of moment. And Skip had asked me to do it for a long time. And I finally decided to do it because I thought it'd be helpful for my children and my children's children to know what their real history was, you know? So the family business, I had been told that they were printers and journalists, but they were in fact enslavers. And my mother so
a hush fell over the audience.
It was deeply disappointing.
Honey, how does this change you, though? You mentioned your mom was upset and this was shocking and maybe deep down you kind of resisted it. How has this changed you, knowing what you're hearing now?
You know, I think at first I was deeply disappointed.
The slave thing is a bummer.
It's a bummer. I still believe,
I know, but
I still believe in reparations, by the way, so y'all can stop texting me and emailing me and
There's so much there, I don't even know where to start. First off, on Joy Behar's tombstone, it should say the slave thing is a bummer. That's what it should say on Joy Behar's tombstone. That's one part. But she's still into reparations. Oh, does that mean she wants to pay reparations now? What the high hell is she talking about? And also, you know, I was thinking while I was watching this, I have a genealogist in my family. Her name is Henny. She's on my mom's side. She's 100 years old. She's traced on my mom's side of the family back to the mid-1750s. I think how psychotic it would be if I looked into that and I was like, well, that guy did something bad. I owe somebody some cash. Gad, help me with everything you just saw on that show. She still has guilt. She still wants money from you.
Well, I'm gonna link it back to what I said earlier. If you remember when I talked about what is the most surprising thing that I've ever seen in my career? If you remember, I said the inability of people to change their minds in light of incoming new evidence. So now she received this evidence. It should theoretically make her a bit more intellectually humble and say, wait a minute, maybe my identity politic positions are wrong. No, she doubled down and said, yeah, reparations. So it's...
Carol, you're a white woman from Russia. You better pay some cash to that woman.
I mean, it's funny because Whoopi Goldberg said this thing where Jews are white, and so the Holocaust was just like white on white violence.
Right.
And you know, some part of me is like, wow, Jews are white now. Look at us go. You know, we weren't always white. And
recent ancestry in the Americas, Caribbean. Ponce, Puerto Rico. Wow, Ponce. I got some blood in Ponce there. Hey.
Modern DNA tests are also very good at detecting these DNA clusters. The places in the world where the people have the most similar DNA mixture as yours. And yes, it points to Puerto Rico. So yes, you're 100% Puerto Rican. Also,
Honestly, very surprised at the fact that I have more indigenous American blood than African blood.
Okay, so he got 10% sub-Saharan African, 16% indigenous. But our friend Ivan didn't speak about the 1.1% North African, probably because he thought it was related to...
Let's go to the Congo!
But it's very interesting to me from a historical perspective. Certainly a small trace of the Muslim conquest of the Iberian Peninsula. But funny how everyone gets mad at the European colonization of the Americas. But when the others did it... what? No, I don't know.
Facts about slavery that you weren't taught in school. Many times in human history, the slave master has been brown and the slaves have been white. Over 1 million Christian Europeans were enslaved by the Islamic Barbary states of North Africa between the 16th and 19th centuries. A particularly valuable type of slave was pale-skinned Christian women. They were highly sought after by Muslim men and often fetched a high price at slave markets. The famous author Miguel de Cervantes, the writer of the character Don Quixote, he himself was captured from a ship and taken to Algiers. He was a slave for 5 years before a ransom was eventually paid.
Oh, I already saw a number I don't like.
Which one?
44% European.
I guess you have to pay reparations now. Look, the proof. You have to pay 44% reparations.
Okay, I can see it. I was expecting more.
Did you see how she's roasting him? Vanessa,
46.9% East Asian Indigenous American.
Okay.
Okay. I got those native roots, I'm very in touch.
You're so in touch with the roots that you probably don't even speak any Mexican indigenous language. So in touch that you're happy that the test simply says indigenous without specifying what tribe. Mayan, Nahua, Zapotec. No, it's just indigenous. Anyway.
Does biology alone determine what it means to be a Native American? No, of course not. Now, take-home DNA tests have been exploding in popularity, and as a result, many Americans are now informed of Native American markers in their genes. So does that mean we can use DNA as we use blood quantum to determine who's Native American? No. Do not pull an Elizabeth Warren. Those genetic markers are not exclusive to Native Americans, and even if they were, they have no indication of which tribe you're related to, if any at all. DNA has no connection to any tribal culture or belonging. Blood quantum, despite being imperfect, implies a trackable lineage from generation to generation. For instance, tribal governments and communities decide who's a member of the community through blood quantum. The people not belonging to that tribe have to respect that.
Wait, Chris, now you can relax. This confirms that you're Mexican, 50% European, 50% Native.
The history of Mexico, similar to its upper neighbor of the United States, includes a significant period of colonization, followed by a war for independence. After the Spaniards toppled the Aztec Empire in the 16th century, their influence spread throughout the region until the Napoleonic occupation of Spain complicated matters in the 1800s. The Spanish had first become involved in Mexico back in 1519, when Hernán Cortés set sail with an ultimate goal of colonization, sparking a vicious rebellion from the Aztec troops. When Cortés returned, he and his troops were forced to retreat as the Aztecs triumphantly fought back. Although the Spaniards managed to kill Emperor Montezuma, they lost most of the progress they had made before the retreat. By 1547, the Spaniards dominated the majority of what had once been the Aztec empires, whilst they enslaved the indigenous people who did not already die from the deadly diseases the conquistadors had brought with them. It is estimated that by 1605, roughly 24 million natives have been killed by such diseases.
Where's Mexico?
Oh my god, is this guy for real? It's not an ethnic DNA test you need, but an IQ test. This further demonstrates that DNA clusters are very accurate. If you take a look at this map, South Mexicans are indeed much more indigenous than the ones from the north. A fun fact, in the 1600s, the island of Tortuga, right here, was inhabited by French and English pirates that would attack Spanish ships coming back full of gold from the Americas. I'm just saying that could explain the English and Irish DNA.
Oh my gosh!
I am 88.7% European. Spanish and Portuguese, I'm 85.4%.
Carolina, don't you remember what you said?
I feel like I know it's gonna be Español, tío.
Of course, after 300 years of colonization, that's longer than the existence of the United States, plus all the Spanish people that migrated to Mexico after independence. For example, 25,000 Spanish refugees settled in Mexico between 1939 and 1942 after the Spanish Civil War, compared to 450,000 arrivals in the 17th century. As a matter of fact, you have more Spanish DNA than many people in some parts of Spain.
Are you even Latina at this? I'm kidding.
I am.
Who's gonna tell her? Oh, I know. And what's sad is that Mexicans deny this heritage, whereas Latinos that grew up in America deny their European heritage.
Spanish and Portuguese, 27%.
Welcome to the team.
40%, 40.9% East Asian and Indigenous. I wanted 70 or 80.
You're 4% less colonized than I am. Congratulations.
This guy, that's the only thing he could come up with. Don't you question the fact that you have 4% more indigenous ancestry than Vanessa, when you're clearly much paler and that colonizer thing. Bro, you are the colonizer. Dare him to open a book about Aztec history. All the conquering, all the slave trade they did to their neighbors. It got so bad that thousands of indigenous Mexicans sided with the Spanish conquistadors to topple the Aztec Empire. In 1521, during the Battle of Tenochtitlan, 98% of the Spanish army was actually indigenous. Let that sink in.
In 1519, Spanish explorer and conquistador Hernán Cortés landed on the shore of eastern Mexico with 11 ships and over 500 soldiers. When they arrived at the temple at Tenochtitlan, they witnessed a priest rip out a living man's heart, raise it in the air, and then toss his corpse down the temple stairs. This one event set in motion a series of cascading events that would forever alter the course of world history and create controversies for Cortés, Spain, and the Catholic Church. Tenochtitlan, the capital city of the Aztec Empire, flourished between AD 1325 and 1521 and was the most powerful indigenous group in North and Central America. They were the dominant Nahua group with an empire that spanned from central Mexico and extended as far down as modern-day Guatemala. Cortés managed to organize his crews of 100 sailors to outfit 11 ships, bringing 508 soldiers and 16 horses. He left Cuba on February 18, 1519 without authorization and headed for modern-day Mexico. The Aztec king, Montezuma II, ruled over his people from a city that was built on a man-made island in the middle of Lake Texcoco. The Aztec were also in contestation with the Mayan people, who were on their decline, and who, like the Aztec, also performed human sacrifices and did raids on the Aztecs for slaves. The Christian, Spanish, and pagan natives would become a clash of cultures. Cortés landed in Yucatan and learned from the natives that others had been there before. These were shipwrecked sailors and others who managed to survive, but they were often taken by the Mayans or the Aztecs and used as sacrifices. Cortés and his men entered the capital on November 8, 1519. The Spanish claimed that it was the greatest city that they had ever seen, as it was clean. It had gardens, palaces, temples, and raised stone roads and bridges that connected the city to the mainland. But it also had gold. He also wrote about the Temple of Skulls, which contained the skulls of thousands of sacrificial victims. A population estimated to be around 250,000 within the city alone, the Aztec did rise up, and Montezuma was killed, either in battle or killed by Cortés's men, depending upon the account you believe. Historians for centuries disavowed the stories of the atrocities the Spanish claimed to have witnessed, claiming that it was propaganda just to justify wholesale slaughter and conquest. But the archaeological expeditions of 2015 and 2018 discovered exactly what had been described 500 years ago. 16th century illustrations depicted body parts being cooked, and archaeologists have identified telltale butcher marks on the bones of human remains in Aztec sites around Mexico City. So the proof was there. DNA tests were conducted on the skulls from the Temple Mayor site, which proves that the vast majority of those sacrificed were not Aztecs, and most likely enemy soldiers or captured slaves. Spanish historian Fray Diego de Duran reported that 80,400 men, women, and children were sacrificed for the inauguration of the Temple Mayor under a previous Aztec emperor predating Montezuma.
Summer was fading fast, and the window for attempting the long and dangerous ocean crossing had already started to close, when on September 6, 1620, an aging 180-ton ship called the Mayflower weighed anchor off Plymouth, off the south coast of England, and set out on her own across the North Atlantic on what would prove to be one of the most historic voyages of the millennium.
They weren't soldiers, they were not emissaries of a foreign government, they were not particularly well provided with supplies. At least half of them were separatists, that is to say, radical Protestants, who were religious exiles, who had been living in Leiden, the Dutch Republic.
They were in many ways the least likely of task forces for establishing a permanent English presence in the New World. Fewer than 50 of the 102 passengers were adult men, many well past their physical prime. At least 30 were children, and nearly 20 were women, including 3 expectant mothers. By the time they set sail, England had still not succeeded in establishing a truly viable colony on the shores of the New World, and their chances of survival, let alone success, were all but nil.
Despite the fact that Jamestown was founded in 1607 and Plymouth was founded in 1620, it became our story of national origin.
Somehow, with the passage of time, the arrival of this frail, unlikely band would come to be seen as the true founding moment of America, and the story of their coming, enshrined as the quintessential myth of American origins. Commemorated each year on the 4th Thursday in November at Thanksgiving, and embodied in a handful of iconic and instantly recognizable images, including a rock and a ship, and a feast that almost certainly never took place as we imagine it did.
There's been a tremendous amount of memory produced around the Pilgrims, but there's also been a lot of forgetting. That memory is very selective. And so to look at what's been remembered and let that shed light on what's been forgotten is an important exercise.
After all, tribes are sovereign governments and use citizenship for more reasons than identity. Citizenship determines a person's access to tribal lands, healthcare, and education, and sometimes per capita payments. The payments equate to a dividend of the profit from tribal enterprises. The majority of per capita payments to tribal members is around $1,000 per year. Considering that 1 of 4 Native Americans live below the poverty line, tribes must be judicious about who is entitled to these rights. So while citizenship is important to access the economic and political identity of Native Americans, it is not the determining factor of who can identify as one. Okay, are you still with me? Because, Professor, can you help us understand what identifying as a Native American actually means?
We have to really be intentional about what it means, and then be clear in our conversations about it in terms of how are you identifying as Native American? But when we're talking about Indigenous identity, we're really talking about a very distinct set of cultural characteristics, of language characteristics, of community and connection characteristics that is not tied just to land. But we also don't want to essentialize. We don't want to just open up the gate and say, like, well, if you feel Native, you're Native. If I think that there's some due diligence that has to go into that, where, if you're questioning your identity, if you're questioning whether or not you belong to a community, you have to do that work.
Look, it's clear from the numbers alone that there's some pretending going on. Like Sacheen Littlefeather, real name Maria Louise Cruz, who used her platform to speak up about Indigenous representation in Hollywood. But according to her sisters, Littlefeather then fabricated parts of her life and identity around harmful stereotypes, such as growing up in poverty with prevalent alcohol abuse. But it's also important to remember the trickle-down effects of having pretendians writing real laws, teaching real classes, or becoming thought leaders on the many important issues across Indian country. But Buffy, the woman we featured in the first episode, the woman who sang this? I mean, she penned songs that spoke to the issues facing Indian country while also advocating for various Indigenous causes, which became a main part of her work. So, does advocating for Indigenous culture make you Native? Or does it make you an ally? Or something else entirely?
Well, passed in 1704 conscripted Indian slaves to fight in colonial wars long before the American Revolution. Indians found themselves caught in the colonial powers' strategies for economic control. The fur trade in the Northeast, the English plantation system in the South, and the Spanish mission system in Florida all caused major disruptions to Indian communities. Displaced Indians from the fur trade in the North migrated south. Plantation owners armed them to hunt slaves living in Spanish mission communities. The French, English, and Spanish manipulated the slave trade to their advantage. They negotiated the freedom of slaves in exchange for peace, friendship, and military alliances. For instance, the British established ties with the Chickasaw in Georgia, who were surrounded by enemies. The Chickasaw conducted extensive slave raids in the lower Mississippi Valley, selling the slaves to the English to reduce Indian populations and prevent the French from arming them. The Indian slave trade stretched from New Mexico, which was then Spanish territory, all the way north to the Great Lakes. Historians believe that every tribe in this vast region was involved in the slave trade, either as captives or traders. Slavery was a key part of the strategy to depopulate the land and make room for European settlers.
We have parents who survived boarding schools. We're connected with our land. We might know our language and customs, and if we don't, we know why we don't. We as natives know the last names in our community because it's so tight-knit. If we don't know you personally, we certainly know some of your family.
I also am Italian American, and I happen to agree with the protester in the back.
Well, I have to say, as a professor, that you would come. I really appreciate that, because I know students come out a lot, but professors don't always come out to hear opposing points of view, so that's a wonderful thing.
It's my duty. But
I've left you speechless. I've dazzled you.
Thank you. In 1492, before a racist and genocider came to this land, there were people living here. Every inch of this land was occupied.
Just as a matter of history, not every inch of the land was occupied. There were huge areas that were completely wilderness.
I was quiet the entire time you spoke. Those people still exist. The North American indigenous people, Central and South American, they're still here. And I would like to know how you can say that they have no ancestral claim to this land, and that as a white person, you can say that they cannot migrate freely and cannot use the land freely that they rightfully own and have for thousands of years.
Well, Mike, I'd like you to be more specific. Which people specifically and which land specifically? Because there were lots of different peoples in the northern and southern, in North America and South America at the arrival of Christopher Columbus. So which people do you think have a claim to which land?
I'm talking about the Native Americans.
But there were many different Native American tribes.
Would you like me to name all the tribes?
Yes, and I'd like you to name, and the reason I would like you to name all the tribes is because there were many tribes who conquered many other tribes. So just as an example, thank you. Just as an example, the Comanche Indians come in and they conquer areas run by the Apache Indians. Now the United States comes in and it owns that land. To which tribe should that revert? To which tribe should that land revert? The Comanche, who had it before us, or the Apache, who had it before them?
Traditionally, within the Apache society, you go by the mother. And if the mother's recognized as Apache, she has her clan, the children are unquestionably Apache. Not in the American context, not when patriarchy trumps matriarchy. So what does that mean? My sisters are short 1/16 of a degree. What does that mean? Does that mean their pinkies aren't Apache? What does that mean?
Being a mixed race person is a whole nother side of it, but that's a very common experience in our tribe. So it's not as if we're unusual in that way. What is unusual is the admixture of Black.
If it were up to the American government, Natives wouldn't be around, because after a certain time, that blood will dilute. It will go out. And so if there's no Native peoples to provide benefits, then we're not obligated to meet these treaty rights. And if we're not obligated to meet these treaty contracts, then the land is available. The resources are available.
And I think that essential point about our claim to sovereignty, our claim to land, our claim to a culture, our claim to resources is one that gets lost if we don't insist upon the fact that we are nations.
As much as possible now, I try to tell people that I have a Native American name, and maybe it doesn't mean anything to you, but it means everything to me. My name maybe doesn't have a romanticized Hollywood Indian name, but my name has more meaning than that. My name means that my family survived. My family survived disease. My family survived Catholicism. My family survived settler colonialism, and my family, they survived.
The president in Washington sends word that he wishes to buy our land.
But how can you buy or sell the sky? The land? The idea is strange to us. If we do not own the freshness of the air and the sparkle of the water, how can you buy them? Every part of the earth is sacred to my people. Every shining pine needle, every sandy shore, every mist in the dark woods, every meadow, every humming insect, all are holy in the memory and experience of my people. We know the sap which courses through the trees as we know the blood that courses through our veins. We are part of the earth, and it is part of us. The perfumed flowers are our sisters. The bear, the deer, the great eagle, these are our brothers. The shining water that moves in the streams and rivers is not just water, but the blood of our ancestors. The rivers are our brothers. They quench our thirst. They carry our canoes and feed our children. So you must give the rivers the kindness that you would give any brother. If we sell you our land, remember that the air is precious to us, that the air shares its spirit with all the life that it supports. Will you teach your children what we have taught our children, that the earth is our mother? What befalls the earth befalls all the sons of the earth. This we know. The earth does not belong to man. Man belongs to the earth. Man did not weave the web of life. He's merely a strand in it. Whatever he does to the web, he does to himself. To harm the earth is to heap contempt on its creator. Your destiny is a mystery to us. What will happen when the buffalo are all slaughtered, the wild horses tamed? What will happen when the secret corners of the forest are heavy with the scent of many men, and the view of the ripe hills is blotted with talking wires? Where will the thicket be? Gone. Where will the eagle be? Gone. And what is to say goodbye to the swift pony and then hunt? The end of living and the beginning of survival.